My name is Joseph Lyons. Welcome to the EHS Roundtable. Today's guest speaker, we have Karen. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Karen, Karen Amata. I'm an EHS specialist.
So, in your current role, since you've left Amazon and you're kind of out of the 1910, are you still kind of like in general industry or?
Yes, yes, I am.
Okay,
It's work
so
just industry.
so from the transition from Amazon to something kind of like where you're at, what would you say has been kind of like the biggest hurdle you've had to like get over so far?
The biggest hurdle is, well, Amazon's such a huge company that their warehouses are, well, they have different types of warehouses. However, their policies and their procedures, their safety procedures and policies are all pretty much tailored to each warehouse and they're all the same across the board. So they're across the warehouses. So each warehouse, whether you go from state to state, they're similar procedures, similar processes, again, depending on the warehouse. The industry I'm in, it's a go as you like a learn as you go. So everything changes, especially with all the regulations that we deal with. I work at a metal recycling company. So not only am I dealing with, OSHA regulations, but stormwater. So I have, RCRA and SPCC, DTSC, um, the Air Quality Management District, and those regulations are constantly changing. So it's not like everything's laid out in a pretty paper. It's kind of a build as you go. It's you take the regulations, you interpret them as best you can, and you go with that until, the next 2 years when the regulation is going to change. So nothing's really laid out. There's no, this is how we do it, this is how it's going to continue to go. It's constantly evolving, and that's something that I was not used to coming from Amazon to this role. It's just constantly evolving.
Yeah, I think so. I've kind of experienced the same thing. Like, when you leave Amazon, because I feel like the structure that Amazon had in place was so well-rounded. Like
Yes.
the quality department, document control, everything from training, like it's all, it was all kind of set already. So when you step out of that and then you're in an area where it's not really standardized yet, it's kind of hard to catch that. How do I get back into that like that groove of, this is what we do, this is what my day-to-day looks like. These are my, my tasks for the week. And I had to
Mhm.
like kind of like you, like build as you go and like learn, okay, this is what I'm going to do this week. Because for me, it was just like okay, I learned this regulation this week. I'm going to focus on everything that I learned to the company this week for what I learned. Next week, it's going to be a new thing. And I'm constantly just like, when you're dealing with something like that, what would you say is like, how do you go about deciding what's most important and what can kind of be put on the back end?
Deciding what's most important is pretty much what's due in the coming weeks. And that's how we tackle things at my current role. There are 7 sites, 8 sites in California, one in Arizona that, we're in charge of, and there's only 2 of us in safety. And it's not just keeping up with, our base site, it's every other site. So it depends on what's coming up, what's due. Um, but most importantly, what's we do prioritize is site walks at least once a month where we inspect everything that could get us fined. So making sure we're good with the regulatory agencies, specifically stormwater, because water in California is very very important. So we have the water boards as well as the Air Quality Management District, and DTSC. So making sure the sites are clean, they're following the SPCC, and that all the appropriate permits for like even our the what is it, the air pressure tanks, the that those are up to date,
Gotcha.
because those could get us, fined with OSHA. That we do have the proper um, BMPs in place for in case it rains. It doesn't really rain too much in Southern California, but when it does, it pours. And so making sure we have that available at all times, making sure there's no oil spills, making sure that we're compliant with that. So that's one of our top priorities. We want to avoid any fines, any additional costs to the company. Um, and we want to make sure that we don't get shut down. So that's part of the priorities. However, they do change as things come through the mail, as we get emails, as we get invoices, as we get inspectors. So our focus isn't just, okay, this is what we're going to do. It kind of shifts day to day depending on what pops up. I
Yeah.
don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get exactly where you're coming from. It's like I feel like the that style of environment is exactly why I love EHS and like why I'm like every day is kind of different. It's a different type of monster to handle. And I feel like I'm just constantly learning pretty much every single day. And you get exposed to all these different agencies. And recently, I've been working with TxDOT a lot, and we're dealing with these traffic controls. And I'm learning so much about like lane closures, shoulder closures, and I'm walking with these TxDOT inspectors, and they're showing me. Every single time I meet somebody from anywhere, I'm like, can I pick your brain a little bit? Can I like, just try to figure out something like, and I think that was the hardest part for me was like being open to say, hey, I'm trying to learn something. Can I, talk to you a little bit? Because I feel like I'm socially awkward and I try not to be. And that's something, and in EHS, I feel like that's like the worst quality you could have because you're talking to everybody at all times. I remember at Amazon, when we would do our gimbal walks. I'd walk up to people and I'd be like, hey, so how you doing? And then I just like I'd struggle through it the whole time. But I think I've gotten a little more comfortable with it now. So as a EHS professional, what has been kind of like the most difficult thing to kind of navigate and learn as you go?
Uh, well, the safety culture. There's When I started, there was a lot of pushback on safety. And it was always this is how we've done it for the past 30 years. This is how we're going to continue doing it, not only from management, but from the employees. Uh, it's been challenging. However, I learned at Amazon that you have to be nice to people, you have to gain their trust in order for them to listen to you. And if you approach them with a why aren't you wearing, or what's wrong with, or why are you doing this, they're not going to listen. They're not going to listen. So it's been challenging. However, I've seen a change. It's slowly building. Gaining the trust of the managers was kind of difficult. Getting them to buy into safety was difficult. Um, the old GM that we had was very operations driven, money, 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 money. This is going to slow us down. This is going to slow down production. No, no, no. So it was seen as we tried, let's move on. But now we do have a new GM with the safety background, which is great, which is perfect because this is what we needed. And it's easier to get them to buy into safety now. But it has been challenging still trying to get the older people that have been there the longest at the company to change their mindset. Like when I'm not doing this to be annoying, I'm doing this because I want you to go home the same way you came to work, with all your fingers, with your hearing, good, both your eyes, both, all your limbs, everything. And it's been challenging to change their mindset, but it's a slow process and I've seen some change.
Yeah, I think so. The buy-in aspect is as you progress in your EHS career, I feel like that's kind of where it leads more, where you have to try to figure out how to, where do we meet in the middle?
Yeah.
And the behavior-based safety aspect is the a new thing that I didn't really know about when I first started. And then when you get a little more comfortable, then you start learning about it more. With me, I tried to do like a safety champion thing or like a safety award type system. A lot of times when you start off, you're that safety cop. You're that
Mhm.
compliance. Hey, oh, I see him without safety glasses. You run over there. You're like, hey, put your safety glasses on. and,
Yeah. Where's your
and
hard hat?
yeah, exactly. And when you kind of start learning a little bit more and you shift out of that, I think the biggest thing for me is if I say something,
Hmm.
I'm going to do it. So I don't ever really, make promises that I know I can't deliver on. And I think that's what kind of, builds that culture is if I offer help, I better be able to do what I said because
Yes.
if not, then it's just going to break that trust. And I think with operations, it's a real give and take. You give me a little, I'll give you a little, and then
Mhm.
eventually we'll be able to go parallel with each other and work together to be in that gray area of here's operations, here's safety, here's the marriage. And
Yes.
I think, like you said, with a lot of these people who've already been doing it a certain way, and they say, "Hey, I've been on roofs for 15 years and never fallen. I don't need a harness."
Mm.
That was the most difficult thing for me to kind of navigate because I'm like, okay, do I be the nice guy right now, or this guy's life is in danger? Do I put my foot down? And I think I'm gauging now how to go about those certain situations of when to put the foot down, when to be that compliance guy versus when
Yeah.
you can give a little. And I think once you kind of master that, I still haven't, not at all. I think it's going to take many years before I do. But I think little by little, I'm getting a little bit better by that.
Yeah, it's difficult when you have those people that you're constantly, you constantly see them without the proper PPE and you're constantly reminding them. It's like at which point do they get a write-up? At which point, it's like I don't want to be that person that people see and start radioing each other like, hey, she's coming, make sure, But at the same time, like send out the bird signals. But at the same time, I do because I want them to know that I'm there to make sure that they're doing things right. They're not skipping steps, that they have their PPE, that they go home the same way they came in, like I said earlier. But it's like you said, it's at which point are you the good cop? At which point are you the bad cop? Like after so many times, it's like I can only tell you so many times before I get frustrated and upset.
Yeah, and so I had a conversation with a manager, and he talked about one of the skills in EHS is being able to have that stress management ability because the amount of compliance and regulations and everything that comes with it, and the amount that's not followed on a daily basis, anybody would just get stressed out at all times. And sometimes I catch myself like I'm thinking about it. I'm laying in my bed and I'm like, man, I cannot believe this guy was doing this today. And it's like it's hard to manage that. Separate
Yeah.
that management. And I think that's something that we all learn. So, in your career, what would you say has been, it's hard to say a mistake, but what's been something that you were like, oh, I really messed up on that, and then you learned from it, and it kind of shaped how you go about the processes of safety.
Okay. So when I started at Amazon, I was, had just gotten into EHS and I was quick to like push, like, oh, you're not doing this. And that's something like kind of like pressure people. And that's something that I learned, it doesn't make them work safer. It just makes them resent you. Um, you, I learned that you have to approach people with a kind of care, like show them that you care about them and not like this is what it is, this is the rule, this is how you have to do it, and this is no, it's like you have to approach them with care. You'd say like show that you care, show that you want them to wear their PPE or, work safely, and show that it's not just them, it's everyone. Like you're not just picking them, you're not just going after them, you're making sure everyone's safe across the board, as well as taking my time to observe instead of just, seeing something and then automatically assuming they're doing something wrong, or, taking my time to observe, see what they're doing, and then ask questions. Give them the why, not just because you have to. It's the why behind it that I learned you have to give. Otherwise, they're not going to understand your perspective. They're not going to understand your point of view, and they're just going to brush it off and forget about it and continue doing what they were doing. So I
Exactly.
feel like that is what I struggled with, but I'm getting better.
Yeah, no, it's a constant. We have to remind people because people feel pressure from deadlines and project time frames and hitting quotas or rates. You have to remind them sometimes and kind of pull them out of that. Like, hey, I know we have this set goal, but you are way more important than any job. Your financial situation could be affected. I think so. I had asked a manager one time because we were getting to kind of gray, sketchy area, and I asked him, and I pulled him aside, and I was like, "All right," and he really wanted to proceed with something, and I was like, "Okay, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to be very honest." And we had our team, and I was like, "Would you bet any one of their lives that you were 100% sure that this wasn't going to affect anybody or hurt anybody?" And he was like,
Oh.
yeah. And then, yeah,
That pause just said everything.
exactly. And
Oh my God.
I try not to use that too often, but sometimes you have to hit them with that, like, okay, would you bet this person's life that you're 100% sure they will not get hurt in this situation? And I think, when you bring it down to that level of like, hey, he's 23 years old. He has his whole life ahead of him. Are you willing to stop that or, interrupt that because we have a time frame?
No, it's a question that does need to be asked because sometimes decisions get made and they want to be as safety driven as they can. However, management, especially operations management, is always more focused on money because that affects the bottom line. And they might think they're doing things or they're making changes that are safe. However, it just takes one accident to just completely make them make them aware that, like, was this really the safest choice? Was this really the safest way to approach this?
Yeah, it's always to let's not wait until after the fact. Let's try to prevent it from even happening in the first place.
Yeah.
So, what kind of advice would you have for someone who's kind of, thinking about getting into safety or, thinking of making this a career for themselves?
I would say, first of all, if you're passionate about making sure people are safe, making sure not just people, but like the environment, um, and you're passionate about change, then this might be something that you might be very interested in. And if it already is something that you're interested in and you want to get into it, like you said, then I would say talk to people in the field, talk to people that have experience, even people that don't have experience and are just starting off their career, pick their brains. If you meet, if you're at a job already and there's safety specialists, safety managers there, talk to them, pick their brain, see what got them into it, see if it's something that, they'll let you maybe tag along or walk with them and let them ask you questions. Like, don't be so close to, only you asking the questions. Let them ask you questions. Let them show you what they see, ask you, like, what do you see wrong here? Because you might not see anything wrong, but from a safety perspective, we can find 20 different things that are wrong while, someone that's just that wants to get into it might just be like, I don't know, I don't see anything wrong. It's like, okay, well, this, and this. And then ask follow-up questions. Why? Always the why. Because
Yeah,
that'll
and honestly, for when you are super passionate about this, and people do come up to you and ask those questions, I love talking about it. Yeah, I love being like, let me show you something, man. Like, and just, walking down, yeah, like a system, and explaining, this could happen if this happens. If, we have our machine guarding, our laser stop system. If this doesn't work, and it's just, it's so fun because I nerd out about it so much. I do. So, how I would like to kind of end these is,
Mhm.
I'll say, to me, safety is, and then you try to almost impossibly what safety means to you into one word. Okay, so
One word,
one word. So to you, safety is
a promise.
a promise.
A
I
promise.
like that. I like that. I like that a lot. Can you expand on that a little bit?
It's a promise that I will do anything that I can to make sure you go home to your family how you came to work. Like I will try my best, try my hardest to make sure you're working safe, that you have everything you need to work safe, that if there's a problem or you see something unsafe, that you can come to me, talk to me, let me know, and see how we can work together to change, what needs to be changed. So I don't know, to me,
Here right now.
safety.
It's beautiful. So where would you like to, so like in the next, what do you see for yourself, your future in EHS? Like what's your top goal?
My top goal, you're probably gonna laugh,
Not at all. Not
is
at all.
to work for a regulatory agency. I want to either work for like Cal OSHA because yeah, they're more stringent, more strict than, OSHA. So maybe Cal OSHA, even the water boards or the Department of Toxic Substances Control, DTSC. Um, well, they do all the waste management, things like that. Or even like the air quality management district. I want to work at a level where I'm going to these job sites and making sure they're compliant and making sure they're doing everything they can to not only, make sure their employees aren't exposed to dangers, but as well as like making sure the environment is good for our little ones.
No, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. I think you can, honestly. And I'm excited to see your career. I'm excited to see it because anytime I see anybody that I work with, go on to something else, something new, something bigger, I'm like, rooting for everybody that I've worked with. Yeah, I kind of feel that same way. Like there's a little part of me that feels like I'm telling people, "Oh, I want to be an astronaut." When I say, eventually in my career, I would like to transition into like the U.S. Department of Labor and try to create change there. And I think it's going to take me a long time, but eventually I'll get there. But
No, you.
I just want to say thank you, Karen. I appreciate your time. It was fun catching up, and I wish nothing but the best for you.
Oh, thank you. It was really nice to see you.